and welcome back to the Crag Chat Climbing Podcast. Today I have my friend Andy on the episode. Tell the people a little bit currently about what you're doing, because it's very exciting and cool.
Yeah, so currently I'm working as a rock climbing ranger at Devil's Tower National Monument. And I've been doing that a couple months now. Before that, I was a setter and just working at gyms and climbing a lot, essentially.
Yeah, so for people that might have never heard of Devil's Tower, like how would you describe it?
But yeah, it's basically this formation of rock, and it's like a cylinder that's coming straight out of the earth. It's like flat plains all around, a few hills all around, and it's just this column of rock, and it's just this big oval, and there's all these really cool pillars all the way across it. And then it's just primarily trad climbing. There's a few bolted routes, a few sport climbs, but mostly trad climbing all the way around. And it's just the only way to the top is through technical rock climbing.
So
Sick.
the last time that we chatted, it's primarily crack climbing, and you're a strong climber, but you're used to climbing in the red and the new, which is mostly, I mean, don't get me wrong, don't come at me, people. There are crack climbs in the red and the new, but you haven't
Yes.
done much.
No, I did a lot of face climbing, sport climbing. I was not a trad climbing at the red much.
Yeah, so how's the journey going?
It's good. I feel like I've like figured it out like a lot more than I started. I've been leading a lot easier and feeling more comfortable, like placing gear, with hand jams and all the jams, foot jams, anything like that. So just like the crack technique is like kind of started to click. The tower is really different. It's very consistent, and all the routes are very long. And so like a lot of times it's like I don't know, especially I still have trouble with hand jams because I feel like I keep like slipping out of them. I don't know if I just have like a weird hand size or like I haven't figured it out. Like fist jams feel really good. Foot jams are like a lot better now. And then anything that's like finger cracks are really good for me. But for some reason, like hand jams, like we were on one climb that was like perfect hand size, like, oh, this is such like an easy climb. It's so smooth. And I was like, I'm gonna die. I was on top rope. I was following, and I was like, I'm gonna die on top rope on perfect hands. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just kept like sliding out of it. And then there's one point I was like in the crack, and my hands were slipping, and I fell out, and I caught myself in like a weird double gas stone on like the worst slopers in the world. And I was like, looked at myself, and I was like, felt my shoulders. I was like, what am I doing? And then I just like dropped off. It was
Yeah.
just weird. So for some reason, like hand jams are like still a little iffy for me. I feel like I'm doing a lot of cupped hands instead of like the thumb down situation. I don't know. I feel like my thumb is not engaging as much as it should for the hand jams, but
Huh.
still figuring it out. When I'm in doubt, I just try to lay back the crack like a sassy little sport climber. And
Have
then
you,
all my
but
coworkers make fun of me.
so do you think that you're starting to like it more? Like because it's becoming a little easier, or you're still like, this is so difficult. I hate this.
It depends on the route. Like there's one route called Solar, and there's like one like that was one of the first ones I got on, and I was just like, I don't know what's going on. This feels so hard. Like it feels super insecure. And then like that was the last climb that I led like all the way to the top on my own. And I was like, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
I felt bomber all the way through. And
Nice.
so it's yeah, getting like used to it and like figuring out the technique. It's kind of like learning to climb all over again.
So tell me a little bit about like how you heard about this job and what the process applying for it is, and like what are you actually doing? You can't just be getting paid to climb all day, right?
Uh, depends on the day. But yeah, so I found out I before I was working here, I was working in Ohio at one of the National Park Service. It was a historical park, so it was like more museumy and indoorsy. But I already had like my foot in the door. I was like already in the system with that. And then I was applying to summer seasonal jobs. It's like usajobs.gov, I think is the website. But that's just where they post all the MPS and US Forest Service jobs. And like one popped up and it was climbing ranger. And, like I was reading through it all. I was like, well, you need a woofer. You need like park experience, like interpretive experience, and then you need climbing experience. And I was like, this is perfect. This is like the last 5 years, that's been all my jobs. So I applied and miraculously kind of got it. So, and now I'm here. Day to day wise, it's kind of weird like this month because June there's a voluntary climbing closure. But like when that's not around, like in May, we do patrols a lot, which is basically just going up and climbing. And that kind of entails like making sure everybody's okay, like doing things safe and being all right. If anybody's lost, kind of helping them out. It also entails like we look at the hardware that goes in, like if things get rebolted, we go and double check that it was done well. Like one time, I don't know what happened, but like there was just a rope hanging on the side of the wall. Yeah, it was just hanging out there. And so it looked like people had bailed or were trying to rappel and just like having a bad time. So they like left their rope and they left like webbing and carabiners and like things clipped all around to the rock. So we just like, well, we'll go clean it up. And so kind of taking all that down. It was just weird situations like that. We also help out with wildlife surveys. Like back in May, there was a lot of research about bats and white nose syndrome. We had to climb the tower, like set up a rappel, and then swab the cracks to collect data samples for the scientists essentially. But we were looking for PD, which is like the fungus that causes white nose syndrome in the rock climb cracks in the routes. And so we would like swab the routes every so often, collect the sample, and then we'd also swab our gear, our shoes, our gloves, anything like that, the ropes, and it's just essentially just trying to see like if there's PD at the tower, if it's like where it is at the tower, like if it's in the boulder field or if it's on the tower itself, and then also wondering if climbers help spread it. So it's like, oh, does the fungus grow on like the cams, and then it's like if you go to one infected crack and then you go and climb an unaffected crack, does your gear spread PD to that clean crack and then infect it? But apparently the fungus can't survive in UV light. So the hypothesis is no, but we collected the samples and then now they're trying to figure out if it's a thing.
Huh. That's so interesting. So
Yeah.
So a little bit of safety, making sure that people are doing okay, not leaving random ropes, and then also like
Yeah.
a little bit of science, a little bit of like conservation. Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty neat.
So this is just for the summer. This is like a summer position, correct? So let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit about you previously worked as a setter for a couple of different gyms in Ohio. People always hate on the setters, no matter what they do, right? Like
Yeah.
I just feel like setters can never win. And so
Yeah.
yeah, maybe what was one of your favorite parts about being a setter? What was one of your least favorite parts? And maybe like something that non-setters don't necessarily know or like maybe think about.
So I guess as far as like the hating on setters, that's generally like behind the setter's back. And it's also, I don't know, in my experience, it's always been like you set a route and then people are climbing it and they're like, this sucks, this is awful, this is so hard. And then you're there and they're like, curse you, Andy, why have you done this to me? And then like a week later, they're like, hey, I sent that one. That was sick. That was a really good set. In my experience, that's what's been going on. So it's always pretty fun. And you get to like, as they like curse your name on the wall, you just get to sit there like, yes.
Yeah.
I've gone them again.
She said this like really evil like layback route that I will literally never forget in my life. It was just the same move 4,700 times. And I
Yeah.
climbed that one route. You were there, you were belaying for me. I climbed that one route and I pretty much was dead for like 2 weeks.
That's awesome. That was probably one of the highlights of my setting career. It was inspired by like uh RockQuest in Cincinnati. They have like just a permanent feature of their walls is just like this giant chimney. And I remember I was going up the chimney like just the same move over and over and over. And then like I was like getting so tired and I was like so sweaty. Like and I was just like so determined to get to the top and get I was like, I have to get out of this freaking chimney. I was like, I have to leave. I have to get to the top and then my torment will end. So I got to the top, came down, and then I remember I was just like, my vision went black and my ears started ringing, and I was just like, I'm gonna get some water, guys. Like I'm out of here. And it was I, like was really dehydrated and hadn't really eaten that much. And so like after doing the same move and using the same muscle over and over and over, like I
Yeah.
was just like passing out. And I was like,
And you're
take
like,
a
I should do
second.
this to other people.
Yeah. I was like, that's a good way to gain strength on the same muscles. You just use it like you just don't get a break from the same layback side the whole way. I really like dihedrals and corners, and I love stemming. And then the head setter at the time was like, don't set any stems. And I was like, no. He's like, cannot set a stem in here. I was like, okay. I was like, and then I kind of jokingly, I was like, what about a layback the entire way? Like kind of joking, but also like this would be pretty sick. And then he's like, I don't think you should do that. That's gonna be so boring. Like nobody's gonna climb it. He's like, it's gonna be the same move over and over. Everybody's gonna hate it. And then he's like, there's gonna be no variation in the climbing. And so like, of course, I ignored him. And I said it anyway. and like
At
it,
the top, it
the
got harder. At the top, it kind of changed. It got harder.
it did. Yeah, I like it was, it's like the same move over and over, but the variation came in like the holds. Like some were juggier than others, some were slopier, some were crimpier. And then like at some point you like flipped over and then we're laybacking. And so it's essentially like a layback all the way up, but there was like a little bit of variation. But again, like same thing. You're like using the same muscle over and over, and then you're like you get to the slopey holds, you're like, this is awful, this is awful. Then you get to the jug, you're like, oh thank God I can rest. And it's like, oh. And so yeah, everybody got wrecked on that one, and it was awesome. And that was one where everybody be like, why would you do such a thing? Why would you create this? And I was like, you're doing great, keep going. Like a lot of people got on it, so it was fun.
Yeah. What was
Yeah,
like one of your probably like least favorite things about being a setter?
one of my least favorite things is like it kind of changed like the relationship with climbing, because it's like you're climbing for work, and then it's like, oh, if I get injured, like that's gonna affect my job. It was a hard balance between like climbing too much and trying to get stronger, but also trying not to get injured, or like trying to like constantly come back from injury. It was like a weird balance between like having enough energy and like enough strength, but also getting stronger for your job, but then also like maintaining strength. Like you're setting and you're climbing like 4 days a week, and it's like when you're forerunning, it's like at least 4 hours of straight climbing, and you're doing the same move over and over and over. Sometimes it's just like smashing your head against the wall, or using the same muscles and tiny like crimping a lot or doing big shouldery moves. And then it's like, at least the schedule I had, it was like we would do like 4 days on, like 3 to 4 days on, and then you'd like get days off, and it's like, oh well, I need to go climb outside so I can get like inspiration for better climbs and I can be a stronger climber, things like that. And then like before you know it, it's like if you want to go climb outside like for the weekend, it'd be like, okay, well, I'm gonna set for 4 days in a row, then I'm gonna have my weekend trip and we're gonna climb 3 days in a row, and then I'm like setting again, and for work I'm gonna be climbing 4 days in a row, and like before you know it, you're climbing like 2 weeks without a break, without a
Yeah.
rest day. And so like that, it's hard to kind of manage with that. And it's like some days you can have like lighter setting days. It's kind of hard to manage resting enough, and taking care of yourself, and
Yeah.
then also like staying stoked to climb, because like when you're so dead tired and your fingers hurt, you're just like, oh god, like yeah, I get to go outside, but it's like sometimes you'd walk up to the wall and you're just like, oh god, I
Yeah.
have to crimp again.
Right. Because
And
you
so,
spent like a lot of your energy working, doing like work climbing essentially. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a really interesting perspective. Just as someone that does YouTube, I love doing YouTube, but when you were talking, it's almost like in my daily life, I'm almost always trying to think of like stories or how this will relate to like the channel and like how I can bring this certain perspective of whatever I'm doing like back to the channel. And it's like, yeah, sure, I'm like out on a climbing trip with my friends, or I'm like, I don't know, in the gym doing this or that. And it's like, but if I'm not like filming or working like for the channel, then like it's like you can't quite escape. And so it changes that
Yeah.
dynamic. But it's like at the same time you don't really want to escape because you enjoy it. You just wish that you could like switch sides of your brain between the work part of it and the enjoyment part of it. Um
Yeah.
if I'm hearing you correctly, that's how I felt.
Yeah, definitely. It was kind of similar, like ever since I started working like outdoor industry, like I did the same thing. It was like backpacking was like part of my job beforehand. I was doing like trail work. And then like one of my supervisors there, like one thing he said that kind of stuck with me, he's like, you have to go out and do like, you know, if you're backpacking for work, you have to go out on your free time and backpack for fun. Like
Yeah,
because like you'll associate it only with work and
right.
like you'll kind of lose the enjoyment or like get disillusioned when you're doing it over and over. And so like going into climbing, that's kind of what I remembered to do too. Like, yeah, this is fun. Like
Yeah. Do you have some of
I
that
chose to do
same
this.
Do you have some of that same feeling now, like working in climbing? Do you, when you have days off? I know you mentioned it's a bit hard finding partners because all your climbing partners are your coworkers.
Yeah. It's a little tricky. It's just like moving to a different area and like living at Devil's Tower is so isolated too. It's like a little island and it's middle of nowhere. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
here's the 10 people who work at the park and 4 know how to climb. And then, you know, when I'm off, the other 3 are climbing sort of or at work. I really enjoy this job right now and like I do to get to climb, but it's different than setting because it's like like the volume of climbing, just the style of climbing we're doing is so different. Like with setting, it's like you get on the wall over and over and over and you're trying it over and over and over. But with like the patrols out here, it's just like a regular day of climbing. Like you're not trying to dial moves and like finesse it. You're just like, oh well, we have to go to the top here and then like we have to check out this section and then do this over here. And it's like, and
Yeah.
since the routes are so much longer and it's such a different style, like you get more breaks, slower, like trad climbing itself is just a slower process. Like it was kind of weird when I actually got here and started working here like the first month. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting weaker. And I was like, I'm not climbing as much. And then but it's been good, like figuring it out. And like I feel like that first month is actually like a really nice like deload month or like a rest for my body and like because I get a lot of tweaks in my traps and so my neck felt a lot better.
Good, good. I feel like it's so interesting because climbing, like there's so many different types of it. Jed and I just went out to Colorado and we did a handful of multi-pitches. And it was funny because I enjoyed the ones where it was like, I don't know if I'm gonna necessarily get this move. Like I might fall on it, I might not. And he really enjoyed the ones that were like, oh, let's just romp up this thing and like, and it's just like a difference in like I don't know what excites you. And I don't always want to do stuff. Like sometimes it is nice to just get on something where it's like, oh, I'm not gonna fall on this.
Mhm.
But I don't always want to do that. And I think it's interesting because he hands down, he was like, yeah, if I never had to get on a route that I knew I wasn't gonna fall on, like he's like, if I could just romp around all day, I'd be totally fine with that. And I was like,
Yeah,
huh,
definitely.
I was like, that's so funny.
Yeah, just different mindsets. It's cool. Like everybody has their different goals and yeah, it's just like just different appeals for what everybody's stoked on. I think it's like with climbing.
So you mentioned something about backpacking and like previous jobs. So we actually haven't talked too much about this, but um, you still like, did you live out of your car while you were doing that? Um,
Yeah.
and were you also climbing? So tell me a little bit about what you were doing with the trail work and like living out of your car and all that stuff.
Cool. Yeah. So I like I didn't graduate college. I went to college a little bit. When I was there, I started working at like the rec center climbing wall. And I was also like started doing backpacking trips like with a club. So that's how I kind of got started with like outdoor shenanigans, all those outdoor activities. And then I essentially decided to gap year. It's turned into like a gap, like 6 or 7 years now. But yeah, like after I left college, I just started working at like a summer camp, and just doing different seasonal work, like everything outdoor recreation wise. It was like a summer camp, and then I started doing trail work, like AmeriCorps, like nonprofits, and like volunteering situations. I was like a ski instructor for a while, but it was just like every 3 months I got like a new job sort of thing for a year. The summer camp that offered me a job was in New Mexico. And they like offered to cover my travel expenses. And so I was like, okay. And then I just like went there. They boarded me. I was in like a little shed at the summer camp, lived there. And then end of that, I was applying for jobs. And the next job I got for the fall season was the AmeriCorps. It was like for Rocky Mountain Youth Corps in like Taos, New Mexico area. And so that was like my first trail work job, which was super fun and like very rewarding. Yeah, for that whole time, I like kind of decided to just live out of my car because I was like, okay, like I'm getting a job every 3 months. It doesn't make sense to like get an apartment in a specific place because I was moving town to town, like moving all over. Basically, I would like live out of my car. And then with like the trail work, you'd work like 10 days on, 6 days off sort of situation. So it'd be like a week in my car and then like a week in a tent, like while working. And so I went back and forth with that. After New Mexico, I got a trail work job in Utah, and it's kind of the same situation. So it'd be like half in my car, half in a tent, and just traveling around, digging ditches, building trail, sleeping in a car. In college, I was working at the wall, and I was like part of the college climbing club. But like the college was really weird. At the time, the director was like, it's a liability for the climbing club to climb outside, so you can't do that. It was bizarre. So nobody in the climbing club knew how to lead climb. So we would all just like meet once a week at like the indoor climbing wall and like sometimes go to a gym here and there, which was silly and has since changed, luckily. After I left college, like I didn't know how to lead climb. I didn't have gear. I just had like shoes and a harness. I was always kind of interested in climbing more. But like while I was doing trail work, I didn't really get into it that much. When I moved to Utah, a couple of my friends, a couple of my coworkers knew how to climb more and was like all my other coworkers and I were interested in getting into it. And so those two guys taught all of us. And then we all kind of just like I learned to lead climb like outside in Utah, just like every so often. I remember on the first trip we did, I remember I was leading and I would clip. I was like, yeah, you just put the rope in the draw and then you just keep going. And I was like at the second draw and I clipped it and my friend was like on the ground and he was new and he was like, hey, I think that's back clipped. I was like, oh yeah, okay. And then it's just like looking at it, I had no idea what he was talking about. I was like, what do I do? And he's like, just like redo it. I'm like, okay. And so I unclip it, I reclip it, and I keep going. And he's like, wait, it's back clipped again, I think. And I was like, oh, okay. And like I just like took it out and I kept like back clipping it until I was like trying to look and see what was different as I was putting it in. And I finally like got it. I was like, that looks different. I'm gonna pretend like that's a good clip. And he's like, yeah, that's good. So I keep climbing, go to the next one, and like the next 3 draws I like back clip and have to keep undoing and putting back in. It's just like the first thing I did when I got home from that trip was like Google what a back clip was.
That's so funny.
It was pretty good.
Why is it so difficult when you're first starting off leading? It's so difficult to like, at least for me, it was really, I'm a very non-mechanical person, but I would backclip all the time. Now it's like, if I try to backclip, I can't like, I'm like, how do you backclip? You know, like
Yeah.
I probably backclip maybe like once or watch, I'm going to go do it immediately after this, but I probably backclip like once or twice a year. And I think I've Z-clipped maybe like twice in all 5-6 years of my climbing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mostly just because if you're Z clipping, I feel like it's the bolts are too close. Like,
Yeah.
but
I've heard it's like easier to Z clip like on roofs and like when things are
that's
getting like
fair.
all messed around.
Yeah,
But yeah, I like Z clipping's kind of weird, especially when it's like vertical. It's like, yeah, only if you're like, you know, your clips are like here and here, and just like, why am I clipping like both of these right now?
yeah.
But
I'm gonna take one of my coworkers to the new for their first, it'll be like their first outdoor climbing trip, and they went, you'll be like appalled at this information. They're like, I think I'm gonna take a lead climbing class, and they're like, they don't know how to lead belay. They know how to top rope belay, but they don't know how to like
okay,
lead belay or lead climb. And I was like, listen, I totally feel comfortable taking you out. I'll just do some easy routes. I'll teach you how to lead belay on a gree. Like, I feel comfortable with
yeah,
that as long as you do. They're like, cool. And then they're like, I actually think I'm just gonna like take a class if I can, because this is in July. I was like, okay, yeah, like that sounds good. And they looked, and they go to a bouldering only gym, so they looked at like the next closest gym. It was $200 for a lead class. And I was like,
what?
they're like, I'm really sorry. I just like don't know if I can swing that. I was like, please don't. Like, please don't take that class. That's
Yeah,
ridiculous. Hello. If you're listening to this, congratulations. You've reached the point where our Zoom meeting ended and I messed up the rest of the recording. So, to round out this episode, I'm going to compliment Andy on being a very understanding guest, as well as tell you all to go check out the links to their YouTube and photography pages, which you can find in the description. I hope you all enjoyed hearing a little bit from Andy's climbing journey, and hopefully, when we're back on the same side of the US, we can get together and do another episode. That's right, Andy. If you're listening to this, you have no choice. You are doomed to yet another episode of the Crag Chat Climbing Podcast. Thanks to everyone for listening, and until next time, stay hyped.